Have you ever said yes when every part of you wanted to say no? You felt the resistance rise in your chest. You knew the request would cost you something: time, energy, peace. And yet your mouth moved anyway, agreeing, accommodating, smoothing over the moment before any tension could take root. And afterward, alone, you felt that familiar ache. Not anger exactly, but something quieter. A sense of having betrayed yourself in a transaction no one else even noticed. It's a strange position to be in, because from the outside you look generous, thoughtful, easy to be around. People tell you you're so kind, so considerate, so selfless. And you've learned to accept the compliment, even though something inside you knows the truth is more complicated. What they're calling kindness often feels like compulsion. What they see as giving, you experience as not knowing how to stop. Most people never slow down here. They either wear their agreeableness as a badge of honor or quietly resent themselves for it without understanding why. But this moment is worth examining. Because what if this pattern isn't virtue? What if it's armor? What if what looks like generosity is actually a very old survival strategy? One that was necessary once and now runs on autopilot long after the original danger is past. To understand why some people can't stop giving, you have to go back further than personality. You have to go back to survival. For most of human history, belonging to a group wasn't optional. It was the difference between life and death. Being accepted meant access to food, protection, and mates. Being rejected meant exposure, isolation, and often a shortened life. The human brain evolved to monitor social standing with the same vigilance it used for predators. Disapproval registered as danger. Conflict felt like a threat to survival. And the nervous system developed strategies to prevent exclusion at almost any cost. For some people, that strategy became appeasement. If I make myself useful, I won't be cast out. If I never inconvenience anyone, I'll stay safe. If I absorb discomfort so others don't have to, I become necessary. This isn't conscious calculation, it's wiring. The brain learns early what works, and it repeats those patterns automatically, long after the original environment has changed. In modern life, the stakes are rarely literal survival. But the nervous system doesn't know that. It still reacts to a colleague's irritation, a friend's disappointment, or a stranger's frown as if something essential were at risk. The ancient alarm sounds, and the response is immediate. Fix it, soothe it, give whatever is needed to restore equilibrium. The gift was never fully selfless. It was strategic, and the strategy was written before you were old enough to choose it. This pattern rarely begins in adulthood. It forms much earlier, in the first environments where a child learns what keeps them safe. In some families, love is conditional. Approval comes when the child is helpful, quiet, accommodating, and it withdraws when they have needs of their own. The lesson lands without words. Your value is in what you provide, not in who you are. Other children grow up around volatility. A parent whose mood shifts unpredictably, a household where tension simmers beneath the surface. In those homes, the child becomes a small emotional meteorologist, constantly scanning for storms. They learn to sense what others need before being asked. They learn that managing someone else's emotions is safer than expressing their own. Kindness becomes a form of surveillance. Some grow up with a depressed or overwhelmed parent who needed caring for. The child steps into a role that was never theirs. The comforter, the helper, the one who makes things okay. They receive praise for being mature, for being no trouble, for being so good. And somewhere deep inside, they learn that love flows toward those who give, not those who need. By the time adulthood arrives, the pattern is invisible. It doesn't feel like strategy. It feels like personality. I'm just a caring person. But the roots tell a different story. The kindness was a solution to a problem that no longer exists. And yet the solution keeps running, because the nervous system never received the message that the danger has passed. There's a particular way the body holds this pattern. It's not just a mindset. It's a physical posture toward the world. The shoulders that soften before you even know you're uncomfortable. The voice that rises slightly, making statements sound like questions. The smile that appears automatically when tension enters a room, even when nothing is funny. The body learned early how to become less threatening, less demanding, less there. This is the nervous system in a state called fawn. You may have heard of fight, flight, or freeze, the classic stress responses. But there's a fourth, fawn. It's the response that says, I will survive by making myself pleasing. I will stay safe by staying small. It's not cowardice. It's adaptation. The body did what it needed to do when other options weren't available. Children who couldn't fight back, couldn't run, couldn't afford to shut down, learned to merge, to attune so closely to others that the self became background noise. Their nervous systems became exquisitely tuned to external signals. A shift in tone, a tightening of a jaw, a pause that lasted too long, while internal signals grew faint. Hunger, exhaustion, frustration, these got filed away as inconveniences. In adulthood, this wiring persists. You might not know you're tired until you collapse. You might not realize you're angry until weeks later. The body learned to mute itself, to override its own signals, because once upon a time, someone else's comfort mattered more than your own survival. And now the volume knob is stuck. From the outside, it looks like generosity. From the inside, it feels like slow erosion. Every yes that should have been a no takes something with it. Not dramatically, quietly. A small withdrawal from an account no one else can see. Over time, the balance runs low. And still the giving continues, because stopping feels impossible. This is how resentment is born. Not in one explosive moment, but in accumulation. The friend who only calls when they need something. The colleague who assumes you'll cover for them again. The family member who never asks how you're doing. Each interaction leaves a residue, a faint bitterness that doesn't match the smile you offered. You tell yourself it's fine. You tell yourself you don't mind. But the body keeps a different record. Chronic givers often experience exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, a tiredness that lives in the bones. They may struggle to identify what they actually want, because wanting has always come second. They may feel hollow in relationships that look full from the outside, surrounded by people, yet somehow unseen, because the version of them that others know isn't quite real. It's the curated one, the easy one, the one who never has edges. The cruelest part is this. The kindness was supposed to create connection. Instead, it often creates distance. When you only show people the agreeable surface, they never meet the one underneath. You become loved for a performance. And somewhere inside, you know it, which makes the loneliness even sharper. For most people, saying no is uncomfortable but manageable. For chronic givers, it can feel like violence. Not logically, the mind knows that declining a request is reasonable, but the body reacts as if something terrible is about to happen. Heart rate climbs. Guilt floods in before the word even leaves your mouth. There's a sense of impending rupture, as if the relationship will shatter from this single refusal. This is the nervous system replaying old footage. Somewhere in the past, saying no had consequences. Withdrawal of love, cold silence, anger that felt dangerous. The brain recorded those moments and made a rule. Refusal equals punishment. Now, decades later, the rule still runs. Even when the people around you are perfectly capable of hearing no without falling apart. There's also a deeper layer. When your identity has been built around being the one who gives, boundaries feel like self-erasure. If I'm not the helpful one, who am I? If I stop anticipating needs, will I still matter? The fear isn't just of the other person's reaction. It's of disappearing entirely, of having no role, no value, no place. This is why boundaries can't be installed like software. They have to be grown slowly, through the terrifying discovery that relationships can survive your no, that people worth keeping will respect your limits, that the world doesn't collapse when you stop holding it together. Each boundary is an experiment in staying whole and finding out who stays when you do. Inside your brain are cells called mirror neurons. They fire not only when you perform an action, but when you watch someone else perform it. This is why you wince when you see someone stub their toe, why you tear up at movies, why yawns are contagious. On some level, other people's experiences register in your body as if they were your own. For most people, this system has a dimmer switch. They can empathize without being overwhelmed. They feel with others, then return to themselves. But for chronic givers, the switch is often stuck on high. Other people's emotions don't just register, they invade. A friend's anxiety becomes your anxiety. A stranger's sadness settles into your chest. The line between self and other blurs until you're not sure whose feelings you're carrying. This is hyper-empathy, and it's exhausting. When you feel everything around you, the only relief is fixing it. If I can make them feel better, I'll feel better. The giving isn't purely selfless. It's an attempt to regulate your own nervous system by managing everyone else's. You become a sponge that doesn't know how to wring itself out. The tragedy is that this sensitivity is a gift when it's boundaried. The ability to attune deeply to others can create profound connection, art, healing. But without containment, it becomes flooding. The task isn't to stop feeling. It's to learn where you end and others begin. To recognize when the emotion you're carrying walked in through someone else's door. They look the same from the outside. Both say yes. Both offer help. Both smooth over discomfort. But inside, they come from entirely different places. One is a choice. The other is a compulsion. And until you can tell them apart, you'll never know if your generosity is genuine or simply automatic. True kindness has a quality of freedom to it. It arises from overflow, not depletion. There's a felt sense of wanting to give. Not because something bad will happen if you don't, but because giving feels aligned. You could say no, and you know it. The yes is chosen, not extracted. Afterward, there's no residue, no quiet resentment, no sense of having lost something in the exchange. Compliance wears the costume of kindness, but underneath there's fear. Fear of disapproval, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as difficult or selfish. The giving happens because not giving feels dangerous. The body moves toward accommodation before the mind even has a chance to consider, and afterward, there's a subtle emptiness, the hollowness of having abandoned yourself again. The shift from compliance to kindness isn't about becoming less generous. It's about becoming more honest. It requires slowing down enough to ask, do I actually want to do this? What will it cost me? Can I give this freely, or am I giving it to avoid something? These questions feel uncomfortable at first. They're supposed to. They're the beginning of meeting yourself at the moment of choice, instead of discovering too late that the choice was already made for you. Somewhere along the way, a silent equation was written. Other people's needs are valid. Yours are a burden. You learn to shrink your wants, to phrase them as suggestions, to apologize before even asking. I don't want to bother you, but only if it's not too much trouble. It's not a big deal. The language of self-minimization became fluent. The language of asking directly never developed at all. For chronic givers, having needs feels like a character flaw. There's a deep, often unspoken belief that needing something makes you weak, selfish, too much. You watch others express preferences freely. What they want for dinner, when they need rest, what they won't tolerate, and it looks like a foreign language. How can they just say that? How do they not feel the shame that would swallow you whole? This shame has roots. Often it traces back to moments when your needs were met with irritation, dismissal, or silence. When the unspoken message was, your job is to give, not to receive. The child learned that expressing need pushed love further away. So they stopped. Not all at once, but gradually, until the very sensation of wanting something became fused with danger. Reclaiming your needs isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's the foundation upon which real relationships are built. Ones where you're allowed to be human, not just useful. The shame will rise when you start asking for things. That's expected. It's the old program running. But each time you ask anyway, you teach your nervous system something new. I'm allowed to exist here too. There's a painful pattern that chronic givers often notice. They seem to attract people who take. Not everyone, but enough. The friend who turns every conversation into their own monologue. The partner who receives care but rarely offers it. The colleague who assumes your help is infinite. At some point, the question surfaces, why does this keep happening to me? The answer isn't that givers are unlucky. It's that giving without limits sends a signal. It says, my needs are negotiable. It says, I won't push back. It says, you can take more than you give, and I'll still be here. This signal is invisible to people with healthy boundaries. They don't think in those terms. But to those who are wired to take, it's a beacon. This isn't about blaming yourself for being mistreated. It's about understanding a dynamic. People who overgive and people who overtake often find each other because their patterns fit together like puzzle pieces. The taker gets endless supply. The giver gets to feel needed, which for a while can feel like being loved. It's a painful imitation of connection, one that leaves the giver emptier each time. Breaking this cycle requires changing the signal, not by becoming cold or closed, but by introducing friction where there was none. Pausing before saying yes, letting some requests go unmet, watching who stays when you stop performing. The people who leave when you set limits were never connecting to you. They were connecting to your function. And the ones who remain? They're the ones worth keeping. There's a fear that lives inside every chronic giver who begins to change. What if setting boundaries turns me into someone I don't want to be? What if I lose my warmth? What if protecting myself means becoming hard, indifferent, closed off? The fear makes sense. For so long, softness was your identity. The idea of building walls feels like betrayal. But here's what no one tells you. Boundaries aren't walls. Walls keep everything out. Boundaries are gates. They let you choose what enters and what doesn't. They don't eliminate connection. They make real connection possible. Because when you stop giving from depletion, you can finally give from choice. And chosen generosity has a different quality entirely. It doesn't leave you hollow. The process isn't linear. There will be overcorrections, moments where you swing too far into self-protection and feel guilty, moments where you retreat into old patterns because they're familiar. This is normal. You're not unlearning a habit. You're rewiring a survival system. That takes time. It takes patience. It takes the willingness to be clumsy while you find a new way to move through the world. What emerges on the other side isn't coldness. It's something more honest. A kindness that includes yourself. A generosity that knows its own limits. You become someone who can hold space for others without disappearing. Someone who can say yes and mean it, or say no and survive it. The warmth doesn't leave. It just finally has a container. When you step back and look at the whole picture, a quiet truth begins to settle in. You were never too kind. You were kind in the wrong direction. All that care, all that attentiveness, all that willingness to absorb discomfort, it was real. It was yours. It just never included you. The capacity you have for gentleness isn't a flaw to be corrected. It's a resource that was misallocated. For years, maybe decades, it flowed outward in an endless stream while the source ran dry. The task now isn't to shut off the flow. It's to redirect some of it back to where it was always needed, to treat yourself with the same tenderness you've offered everyone else. This isn't selfishness. It's completion. The kind person you were always capable of being includes a self that's allowed to rest, to want, to take up space without apology, a self that doesn't need to earn belonging through endless sacrifice. You were always allowed to exist, not as a function, not as a fixer, not as someone else's regulation system, but as a whole person with edges and limits and needs that matter. If this put words to something you've carried but never named, you're not alone. The pattern runs deep, and recognizing it is the first step toward something different. Not a harder version of yourself, just a more complete one. One who can finally offer kindness without abandoning the one person who needed it most. You.